afternoon, everybody. My name is Larry Spataro. I live at 1567 6th Street in the city of Muskegon. First of all, let me just say I am here on my personal time. I am on annual leave today. And I am speaking as Vice Mayor of the city of Muskegon after consulting with the mayor and the city manager and having some informal discussions with the rest of the city commission. The mayor himself would have been here, but he got a late-minute conflict, so he's unable to attend.
Can you speak up just a little, sir?
Sorry. So I would like to break my comments down into two separate issues because I see this has been presented all along as two separate items, so I'll address it the same way. First of all, clearly there is a need for a new jail. The capacity of the jail, to me, is something that is up to the court system and the sheriff to figure out what is an appropriate size. But anybody who's gone through the current jail facility knows that it is unconscionable that it is still in use, that it doesn't work, and we need a new facility. And we would just as soon keep that facility in downtown Muskegon for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is we appreciate the economic impact of having the sheriff's deputies who work here, stay here, and support the local businesses during the course of their day. However, we are not in support of any proposal that would require the elimination of part of the city infrastructure. It was a very recent addition that this proposal would require the vacation of Pine Street. Having spent over a decade on the Planning Commission and having done a lot of research and learned a lot about urban planning over the years, one of the things that we learned that harmed our downtown over the years was closing off the street grid and restricting traffic access. And as a result, not for the only reason, but one of the reasons our downtown started to wither was that lack of proper traffic circulation. Closing off Pine Street would be an economic blow to our redevelopment of downtown. Now, on the bright side, it does appear that this facility is not contiguous to the existing building, but is connected by a corridor. And a potential compromise, which we would gladly support, would be if the building was moved out of the street right away and that corridor either elevated or turned into a tunnel so that Pine Street could remain open and we were not causing harm to our downtown business district. So if that can be done, that is certainly a proposal that we could get behind and support. The other item has to do with the Youth Transition Center. Again, anybody who's been through that facility knows that it is inadequate and does not meet the needs of the children of this county. Unfortunately, despite the fact that we were told that everyone's had an opportunity to be heard, Craig School was not listed as an item during the various public design charrettes. And the first notion that Craig School would even be considered as an option for this facility and the first chance for public comment has been basically this meeting here today. I know the neighborhood intimately well. I live a block away from Craig School. There are houses facing Craig School on all four sides. For those who've been in Muskegon a little bit longer, you may remember a while back the city of Muskegon created Clara Shepherd Park a few blocks away from this site and removed the rims from the basketball courts that were mentioned in this presentation. Why did we do that? Because even though we had a pretty good handle on keeping those courts closed at night, the fact is that the basketball and the noise attendant to that created a lot of disruption and distress for the homeowners who face those basketball courts. And the idea that this site could be fenced in and have this kind of activity would be extremely distressing to this part of the neighborhood. This is just not an acceptable use for this site. In fact, Craig School as the alternative school has created quite a bit of hardship on the immediate neighbors between the traffic and the kids who walk off, that you can't smoke on school property and so on. And it has been quite a bit of problem. I know that I have some neighbors here who will be speaking as well on this issue. Oftentimes when someone like myself makes these kind of comments, I've been accused of NIMBYism, not in my backyard. Well, I will challenge you with, why is it always in my backyard? Why is it Nelson has men's rescue mission and a women's rescue mission, and the high school, and Nelson School, and 6 churches, and more adult foster care homes in the entire city of Norton Shores? And that's just in the residential areas. We're not even talking about the commercial areas. We also have things like the clubhouse for the severely mentally ill folks. We have the lemonade stand. We do our share, and we shoulder a significant amount of social service responsibility within our neighborhood. And speaking as a resident of that neighborhood, and on behalf of my neighbors and constituents, I think we do enough. And I think it's time for us to look elsewhere for a facility of this type. It may be convenient and it may be cheap, but as the Dr. Schultz says, isn't it first most important to do no harm? And I think in this case, locating a facility of that type in a neighborhood, in a facility that's been a problem over the years, would cause too much harm for the benefit of children. So those are my comments. I hope you take those into consideration when you do your deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Matt Rehan to discuss jail.
Nice job.
Good afternoon. Well, if any of you need a good bedtime story, it looks like they provided you with one. One of the things that was brought out at the meeting, the series of meetings at the end of August, was the fact that there's approximately a third to half of the inmates in the jail on the date that was various dates that were chosen that were classified as obstruction of justice. And the sheriff indicated at that time he was going to go ahead and have his staff go into a little more detail as to what exactly those people are in there for. Has that yet been done?
Yes, sir. Reported to this committee a few meetings ago.
Okay, so you have that, is that the amount, is that,
Online?
it's online?
No, is it on?
It should be, yeah. The part of the minutes, yeah.
Okay. So what did that brief that came out to still needing the number of beds that you're going for?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, one other thing that was just brought out was that there's this underlying current that the state is going to be having the county take prisoners. Well, if there's no room in the jail, the county can't take the state's prisoners. And one of the things the federal government's fond of doing is saying to the states, here, you take it, we're not going to give you the check to go ahead and pay for it. And the state as well is fond of saying to the local units of government, here, you go handle us, but we're not going to give you the check. Go ahead and get the money somewhere else. Has the state said anything at all about chipping in for any cost of this project?
Of this project? No, because it's a local project.
But then you're saying, you said earlier, the state is going to be, you said it, or the gentleman from Kalamazoo said it, that the state's going to be requiring? Is that the word I heard?
No, one of the drivers of looking at some of the facility needs in terms of housing space and housing design, one of the drivers is the potentiality for policies at the state level to continue to hold more felons at the local sites. Now, if a judge orders a felon in jail to be held in the county jail, I'm going to hold him here.
Right. I understand you have no
I'm
choice.
sure you're well aware of that.
Right, but if the judge realizes there's no room, then he can say instead of 12 months, you give you 12 months and a day and ship you off to Jackson.
No, not if the sentencing, if it's a cap at the state that doesn't allow for that. There are what's called lockout. If the person falls within the lockout grid, prison lockout, which basically becomes a prison lockout. even though it's a felony, their guidelines are scored as such, as a felony, but it doesn't score them to the point where they go to prison, then they're held to local jail.
Right.
As the state shifts their policies and those guidelines expand or decrease, in our case, that means there's a potential for more what used to be state level prisoners coming to the local level.
But as we speak today, we don't know that, right?
Well, I think if you look at the trend across the nation and we follow the trend, that is coming. There's an emphasis nationwide to do more at the local level.
Well, I realize that, but there might be the emphasis, but these people that are requiring us to do more at the local level are all on the state level, and once again, they come and hint and cajole and they put the carrot before the stick, and basically do everything to write the check. So
Welcome to my world.
if they're not willing to write the check, then I don't think the county need to worry about what the state's desires are.
I think we do, because if the judge says the person's going to the jail, I still have to hold them at the jail.
Right. That indicates there's also other options that we also discussed in the 4 days.
Not necessarily. I think, I'd hate to be to the point where we don't prepare for it, and then it comes. And now we gotta scramble and figure something out. Let's prepare for it. Let's do this right.
Well, I think one of the
Okay.
ways to, I'm almost done, by the way.
Yeah.
I think one of the ways to prepare for it, let's say all of a sudden it comes upon you where you're quote unquote stuck doing it because the state guidelines change, is that there's other counties who have been foolish enough to build large jails and have their overcapacity. So merely ship the prisoner there at a fraction of the cost that it's going to cost to build.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're talking about something that you really don't know a lot about. It's more expensive to house a prisoner outside an outside county. It's more expensive in the long run to the taxpayers of the community that's sending them out. So, I mean, it's like when you were convicted of your felony, you were sentenced here, right?
Right.
You spent your time here, even though it was a felony. Even though it was a felony.
Right.
Okay. So and there's more of that coming. We can see that.
Well, that depends on what the judge does. In my case, the judge could have given me probation. He didn't have to do that.
But again, whatever the judge says is going to happen is what I'm going to do. That's my point. Okay. Next
I
time.
understand. You're charged with whoever the judge goes ahead and says, here you go, here you got to take it.
All right.
Take it.
Mr. Next comment.
Give me about 30 more seconds. I'll be done. I don't want to go over Mr. Spataro's time limit. But the thing that still has to be kept in mind here is that it's always up to the community to decide ultimately who should be in jail. And we still are. I'm getting the feeling, the impression on this whole committee that you're doing something today, then you're going to do something next week, and it's like there's going to be a bum's rush to get something through. I don't think that should happen.
I disagree. There's been no bum rush. This is not an effort to bum rush anything. I think we've exercised extreme diligence in this whole process. Again, there's been no decisions made. We are at the point now where we have a framework to start making some decisions, some detailed decisions. But nothing's been decided. But now we have a framework to start working with them to make those decisions.
You're willing to put this on the ballot, too, right?
I don't see. No, I'm not going to go for a millage. I don't think it's fair to the taxpayers who ask for a millage.
What?
What about just an advisory question? Do they want it yea or nay, like the city of Muskegon did with the sampling zoning?
I don't think that's an expense worth incurring.
What?
I mean, that's what this committee is. This is a committee made up of representatives from different parts of the community, different commissioners, different disciplines. We're kind of the advisory. That's how I see it.
Even though most of you draw a living paycheck. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Parker on the Juvenile Center.
Good afternoon, everyone. When this issue come about, I was asked, how did the neighborhood feel about it, the residents in the neighborhood feel about it. And I spoke with many of them, residents in the neighborhood on the phone and through email. And it was consistent that we looked at the neighborhood as trying to build a secure and safe place. But yet, when we look around, there's always something happening in Nelson neighborhood. And we are quite appalled with that. If most of you are not familiar with Craig School, that is a large area of space. And to secure a space like that will cost you a lot of money. It goes from one end of Park and Southern to 6th to East to West Forest, all the way back around to Park Street. And to put a transitional center there right in the neighborhood, the hub of the neighborhood where we already are experiencing a lot of problems within that neighborhood. And I'm sure many of you realize that. There's things happening in that neighborhood all the time that we're trying to fight against. And we're hoping for the best for that neighborhood. We want that area to be nice for people to come in. We want it to be nice so that we can patronize the businesses that are coming to the downtown area. We would like for the kids to grow up in a safe and secure environment, but we can't do that when we're always fighting against an opposition, which we see is quite destructive to that community. And I'm hoping that when you consider this proposal for Nelson, Craig School that is, that not let the economic be a factor. Let it be that it will benefit what we would like to see in that community. We would really love to see that community grow and be healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Mills, general consensus regarding new jail plan.
Thank you. My name is Dan Mills, 1817 Mills Avenue, Bryan, Port Pike. And I'll keep this under 3 minutes if I'm not interrupted. We don't want to get into a debate right now, right? This is my turn to talk. Appreciate it. Anyway, this planning process began with public involvement. If I'm quoting the friend here, the speaker for today. Big turnout at the charrette, a.k.a. charade. That's what my friends call it. The general consensus was that we need a new jail. The question was how big, and I got to correct that. Actually, the general consensus was quite different. The turnout was big. The general consensus was overwhelming. And the general consensus is, as it has been, that the current facility is poorly mismanaged. That it actually violates ethics, codes, human dignity, and human rights, as was stated at the Citizens Review Committee, which was quickly dispatched. Committee chairman, this is all on video, I'm not making this up, and it's verifiable online. Violates human rights issues, violates codes, even though the sheriff corrected me that they've never been cited. Big difference between being cited and being in violation. Anyway, the general consensus is and has been and was that there has not been convincing evidence, such as a comparison of cost analysis, between refurbishing the existing facilities and building new. Now, a lot of people just blow off the idea of refurbishing the existing facilities, but I got to tell you, I come up in a family in the trades, property development, and my brothers and I, as partners, developed the Midtown building, for instance, the Hackley Hume building, a lot of the historic buildings downtown, the Hubby House, and a bunch of others. It does take a certain, a little bit extra know-how rather than building a new facility. You can't just follow a blueprint. You got to know what you're doing. But it is actually cost-effective to refurbish existing buildings. They've been doing it in Europe for centuries. But that has not been presented. Matter of fact, questions that were asked in May, and you can see these online again with these videos, I'm not making it up, have not been answered still. Citizens ask questions and they haven't been answered. They're interested. They haven't been answered. They weren't answered at the charrette. It's obvious to the citizens that the driving force in this jail expansion plan is money. As Ms. Hammersley herself said, and is on video online early enough, that this is viewed as a revenue resource, a source of revenue, which isn't a good reason to lock people up. She said over and over again, cost savings, we're getting the cost down to zero by stacking the cells up, by reducing the staff, and by limiting conversations with inmates and their families and their attorneys and the judges to video conferencing. And so we can reduce the cost to zero. And that is a national trend, of course. money is the driving force, and we're not seeking to actually, as I asked, satisfy current market needs, or are we trying to increase our market share? And Ms. Hammersley's answer was, well, we're looking towards state and regional partnerships. Now, I'd like to ask you, how is some kid locked up here who's actually from somewhere else in the state going to visit with mom and dad, or his judge and his attorney, other than video conferencing? So we're looking to increase revenues, reduce costs, and stack them in like a hen house and raise chickens, instead of people. Anyway, the people, general consensus, the people in this community deserve and expect to be able to vote on this, because it's quite a big expenditure and it impacts the people here. And the people in this community are pretty outraged at the notion that a bunch of people sitting behind a counter here can make this kind of a decision in their face and against their will. Now, there was also a big turnout on M Live, because this issue was brought up, and Eric was telling everybody at the time, it was a big turnout there. Conversations about this jail expansion plan. I checked in from work. By the way, I'm on my free time too. I took the day off of work, and so I'm not getting paid to be here. I'm actually sacrificing it to be here. But I was able to check in there at noon in the lunch hour, and I noticed that there was a big turnout. There was 100% against the jail plan. The only supporter was Mr. Gartner himself, Advanced Publications, a.k.a. reporter, quote-unquote reporter. Mr. Carter was on it. Okay, there were zero answers to questions that were asked, as always, and so there's that. Now, I would just like to say one thing in closing. If you do want to find real information, not propaganda, look online, derailthejail.org. Derailthejail.org has links to the videos of you yourselves. And thank you.
More sheets. Okay. Give me your own sheets. Is there anyone else? Raise your hand if you want to, Scott.
At 3176 Worcester Drive in Muskegon Heights, and to the council and to the committee. My question is to Joe. You talked about maybe the existing jail, and you wanted to keep 160 inmates in the basement. Visiting the jail and looking at the 160 down there, the lighting is very poor. There's no windows, and they have to have natural light. So I just want to know, are you going to renovate that basement? Is it going to be plenty of light? Is you going to open up some windows, or are these people going to have natural light? Thank you.
Actually, I asked them that very question.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We contacted the state jail inspector to see if they would grandfather that space in as meeting the MDOC standards. And they told us if we did some plumbing upgrades, we need to add some showers and improve the lighting and things of that nature, so that we do have a budget to do some renovation down there and get it in compliance with MDOC standards and clean it up. So yes, we will be doing some of that work.
Thank you.
Other audience members? Sir?
I'll be very brief. My name is Kwame James. I am remembering the charrette process from a few months ago, and I'm enjoying the commitment that the administration and the county seems to be putting toward collaborating with the community on figuring out the best solution for the current conundrum. I do appreciate that politics plays an important role in any sort of group decision, and when there's a situation like this where we're all collaborating to come to an agreement, people often are telling the story of what's happening from their own individual perspective, with sometimes a very blatant disregard for the other perspectives and the other versions of the story that are being perceived by the other people in the room. So, knowing that everybody has a different take on what's right and what's wrong here, I think it's really important to recognize that the word consensus, as applied to what we're dealing with in terms of the state of our agreement right now, is I think a little overblown. I don't believe there is such a thing as a consensus on this issue right now. And I think it's important to be aware of that one fact as we proceed forward, because when there isn't that broad agreement, then you're certain to upset somebody apple cart. So unless we can actually come to a real consensus, I believe we better all remember to tread very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Others?
Hello, excuse me. My name is Dylan Hawk. I live at 2019 Harrison Avenue in Lakeside. And one of the thoughts that struck me as I was listening to the presentation today is that we are talking about the new jail as an ideal, as it seemed, as the population stands today. If we expand and build this new jail or renovate and expand, we will have this much room per inmate. But what is to stop us from overcrowding this new, even larger jail as well, as the national trends also go? I've seen an ever-increasing expansion of jails and prisons across this country. We have one of the highest incarceration rates in the world. And my question is, when does it stop? When do we stop building more space to house people who have committed crimes? There are some people who need to be in jail, let's face it, but there are other people who don't necessarily need to be in jail. There are alternatives. But when do we stop just expanding to cover all those folks, to just throw them in there? And when do we start considering how to fix the societal problems that each community faces at the local up through the federal level, and adjusting the country we live in to better take care of its citizens, to educate and to provide health care and housing, and so that we create better citizens, so that we have fewer people to lock up in the first place. I see this new jail. I want better conditions for the inmates, absolutely. But I don't want to see an expansion of a jail that in turn becomes overcrowded just like all the rest have. And then, just as the gentleman said so passionately, then we have a serious health problem. People are being thrown in a hole, and whatever the ventilation is, if you put too many people in a small space, we're going to have problems. It's not humane, it's not healthy. And I don't think that it's illogical to make the leap that that is a likely scenario in this situation locally and across the nation. And I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you.